In this video lesson, we will examine how to create characters and setting. In short, we are looking at how to write the exposition of the story. Before we begin, please ensure that you would have completed lessons 4 and 5. If you have not done so, please pause this video, look at those lessons, and come back. Now, once you would have done that, let us begin. Now, when we talk about describing a person, or rather creating characters, in order to create a character that is considered to be believable, considered to be realistic, we have to describe that character in our story. Now, when we talk about describing a character, we can present a character in many different ways. One of the ways we can describe a character is by looking at the character's appearance. We can look at the character's style of clothing, manner of walking, color and style of hair, facial appearance, body shape, expression, or even the way the character speaks. All of these are placed together in order to create a character, or rather to create the character description. Please remember that when we are looking at characters, we are not just looking at the character's physical appearance. We also need to consider how the other characters relate to that character, as well as the character's attitude and mood. Next, we look at using adjectives to improve character descriptions. Now, we must remember, or we must define the term adjectives before we begin. When we talk about adjectives, we are talking about words that describe nouns. In short, you might have heard adjectives being described as describing words. Now, in looking at the character, we're looking at a paragraph from the story about Harry. We would have read this story previously in lesson 5. Now, having looked at the story, we can see that this character showcases a description of Mary Beth. Mary Beth Let's read the description. Her jet black hair cascaded down her back in multiple curls and kissed her chocolate skin. Her eyes appeared to be midnight black. However, the truth was, they were the darkest brown eyes that Harry had ever seen. Harry closed his eyes, remembering the beauty of Mary Beth. Now, from the description that was provided about Mary Beth, can you identify the adjectives that are used within this paragraph? I'm going to give you a few seconds to look at the paragraph and see if you can list the adjectives. And remember that adjectives are words that describe nouns. So take the time to write the adjectives now. So now you would have had a few seconds to examine the paragraph and to identify the adjectives used in the paragraph to create the descriptions about Mary Beth. If it is that you are not finished, you may pause the video here, continue with the activity, and then start the video once you are complete. If you are finished, let us proceed. Now, in looking at the same paragraph, we can see the adjectives that are used to describe the various nouns in the paragraph. So her jet black hair. So jet black is used to describe Mary Beth's hair. The question on the table is, why would the writer use the adjectives jet black? What image is the writer trying to create? What message is the writer trying to convey to the reader? If it is that you would have said how deep and dark Mary Beth's hair is, you are correct. So instead of saying that Mary Beth's hair is dark, the writer goes ahead and shows us that her hair is jet black. Now, cascaded down her back in multiple curls. Multiple curls allow us to see that Mary Beth had very curly hair. So not only is her hair nice and black, really black, but it is also curly. And then it goes on to say chocolate skin. When you think of the word chocolate, you think of something very lovely, very beautiful. In my mind, I'm thinking of something dark, thinking of, and I was about to say delicious because somebody is going to say that. But chocolate skin to emphasize the color of Mary Beth's skin. So although Mary Beth has long hair and lots of curls, we know that Mary Beth is black because of her chocolate skin. Because oftentimes the word chocolate is used to describe dark color skin, right? The next thing we look at is the fact that her eyes are described to be midnight black. Once again, we get the idea that Mary Beth's eyes are very deep. You know, have you ever looked at someone's eyes and it seems like you're looking into a pool, a dark blue pool? I'm not talking about blue eyes, but I'm talking about eyes that seems to kind of reel you in. But although the writer says that her eyes appear to be midnight black, we understand that they are in fact the darkest brown Ari has ever seen. And so from here, we have the idea that Mary Beth is a beautiful young lady. Now, it must be said that when we are creating our descriptions, our intention must be to show the reader instead of telling the reader. So instead of just coming out and saying Marybeth has brown eyes, black, long hair, we see the writer uses these simple adjectives to create a picture for the reader. This is very important. Now, still looking at using adjectives, we can look at setting. And remember we said that setting speaks about the physical location in which the story takes place. We also need to remember that the setting talks about mood, time, atmosphere. Very important. Now, looking at that, we are going to be looking at the setting from our first story that we read in lesson 4. And we're looking at the setting of the graveyard scene. Now, if we should read our paragraph, the graveyard was cold, dark, and dreary. One weary old oak tree leaned over the entrance gate, and broken, battered headstones were scattered all around. I could hear the sound of the howling wind and the creak and groan of branches as they swayed in the storm. The smell of fear and rotten leaves filled my nostrils, and I swallowed deeply, afraid I would get sick. So from this tiny paragraph, we have such vivid images of the graveyard in which the story is set. The question I have to ask is, what are the adjectives that are used in this paragraph? Can you identify them? I will wait a few minutes, or rather a couple of seconds, for you to list the adjectives. Now, if it is that you are not finished with identifying the adjectives in this paragraph, please pause this video and complete the activity. Once you're finished, you can restart the video. If it is that you are complete, let us now look at the adjectives. Now, the graveyard was cold, dark, and dreary. Here we have some adjectives that are highlighted right here to describe the graveyard. What is the writer trying to say by indicating that it was cold, dark, and dreary? What image is created in the mind of the reader with the use of these adjectives? Is it showing how desolate the graveyard is? Is it showing how scary the graveyard is? Is it telling us that this is not a place that we would not like to be? Also, we see weary old oak tree. So we see those suggesting that this tree has been there for quite some time. And to add to that image of some place that is in disrepair, we see the entrance gate, we have the oak tree, but further on, the headstones were broken and battered. What does it mean when we say broken and battered? And this also creates a device. But what does it mean when we say broken and battered? Is it showing us the state of the headstones? Showing the state of disrepair once again of the graves in the graveyard? Because they were scattered all around. Adding to this dark image of this location, we hear the wind, the howling of the wind. And so, the howling of the wind, along with the creak and groan of the branches, suggests that this is a very scary location. To add to all of it, we have the rotten leaves filling the narrator's nostrils. So would you say the images presented here are appealing to you as the reader? Would you want to be in such a location? Also, is it that the writer uses these adjectives to appeal to the senses? Are we able to feel, to see, to hear what would have been happening based on the adjectives used? And so, if it is, and it is, the writer would have appealed to our different senses. So, from this first line, we're able to feel the cold and dark and dreary. We're able to see the broken and battered headstones. And we're able to hear the howling of the wind and the creak and groan of the branches. And we are able to smell the rotten leaves. The writer uses the adjectives to appeal to all the senses of the reader, and this further helps to create the image of the setting. Now remember, we said when we are creating our characters and our setting, we need to show, not tell. And the use of adjectives is a perfect way to show the reader instead of telling the reader. And when I say telling the reader, it's just saying the graveyard was old, it was dirty, there was a lot of wind, instead of creating the image so that the reader can come to that conclusion on their own. So here are some adjectives that you can use to improve your writing. Remember that there are different kinds of adjectives that provide different kinds of descriptions. We look at adjectives that provide information about feelings here. Adjectives that can be used to describe people, noise, and size. Most importantly, at the CSEC level, we need to remember that when we're using our adjectives, there are synonyms for these adjectives that might be more appropriate to be used. For example, instead of saying something is big, we can say it's gigantic, it's immense, It's mammoth or massive. All of these words are synonyms for the word big. Next, we look at the use of figurative devices. Now, there are many different figurative devices, but today for this lesson, we're only focusing on two. And these two figurative devices are personification and metaphor. First, we're going to look at personification. Now, personification simply means giving human-like qualities to inanimate objects. What do I mean? A door is an inanimate object. A tree can be an inanimate object. A bag can be an inanimate object. So these are things that are considered to be non-living. When we give them human-like qualities, qualities that are similar to that of human beings, it is said to be an example of personification. Let us see what we mean. In the description about Mary Beth, we see her jet black curl hair cascaded down her back in multiple curls and kissed her chocolate skin. Right here, we see where the writer has chosen to give Mary Beth's hair qualities that are assigned to human. Can your hair kiss you? If the writer uses the word kiss, what is the writer trying to imply? What is the writer trying to say about Mary Beth's hair? If you said that the writer is trying to say that her hair is touching her shoulder, you are correct. Why would the writer do that? Is the writer trying to let us know that Mary Beth's hair is so long that it is kissing her chocolate skin? Is that one way of allowing us, the reader, to come to the conclusion that Mary Beth has long flowing hair? In this way, the writer would have created that idea for us by using the personification highlighted here. Another example is from the story about Harry. Well, it's the same story. And this is when the wind blew, there was a strong stench that consistently assaulted Harry's nose. What is the personification here? Can the wind assault Harry? The word assaulted is suggesting that the wind attacked Harry's nostrils, right? Now that is giving human-like qualities to the wind. But not the wind, the stench. Now, what is it about the stench that would have caused Harry to be assaulted? What is the writer trying to convey about the stench? Is the writer trying to say that this stench is so overwhelming, so powerful, so disgusting that it attacked Harry's nostrils? That's one way of putting it. So instead of the writer coming out and saying, well, that was very stink, The writer instead used this personification to highlight how horrible this stench was. Now, the next thing on our list is a metaphor. Now, a metaphor is a comparison between two things without using as or like. So when we say, I am a mountain, I am a lion, that's a metaphor, because you're comparing yourself to a mountain or a lion without using as or like. If we should look at the graveyard scene, we will understand that right here, I hear the sound of the wind howling. What two things are being compared here? Next, what message is the writer trying to convey by using this comparison? So first, what two things are being compared? When we say howling, which animal howls? Is it a fox? Is it a wolf? Is it a dog? Depending on the situation, any of those answers are acceptable. Now, what is the writer trying to say when he or she says, the wind howls? It is howling. Is the writer trying to say that it's very windy? Is the writer trying to say it was loud? Is the writer trying to say the sound of the wind was scary and a little disturbing? All of those things are plausible. And all of those ideas go to say that this location was not a location to be in. It was very scary, right? The next place we want to look at is the story Harry. Harry's story. He had seen the house transform from a place of joy 10 years ago to a lifeless shell. What two things are being compared here? Are we seeing where the house is being compared to a shell? And by comparing the house and the shell, what message is the writer trying to convey? When we think about a shell, we think of something that is empty, something that is, as the word says, lifeless, to show how empty the house is. Why would the writer want to convey that image? Now, as we look at these uses of metaphors, we understand that figurative devices can be used to improve our writing and used to help to improve our descriptions, used to help to develop images in our writing. And this is very important when it comes to creating our setting and to writing our characters. Now, as we said before, there are many other devices, similes, alliteration, broken and battered, so many other devices that you can use. But for the purpose of this lesson, we're keeping it simple and we're only looking at the use of personification and the use of metaphors.